Climate change is bringing droughts and floods around the world.
But with climate change, the season is now considerably warmer.
Emissions of greenhouse gases need to peak within the next 3 years if we're to stave off the worst effects of climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate crisis.
Du phénomène climatique.
El calentamiento global que está.
Climate change is everywhere, and whether you like it or not, it's a fact. The number of scientific evidence out there is enough just to prove it. And we don't even need them, because if we look at our daily lives, it is impacting us from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. From floods in the middle of springs to heat waves driving temperatures above 40 degrees in summer to more frequent storms and typhoons. All of this are consequences of climate change. Yet, nothing changes, or rather, things are getting worse. For example, the overshoot day, meaning the day where we consume the equivalent of resources that the Earth can produce in 1 year, happened on the 24th of July. Furthermore, according to the last IPCC report, limiting the global warming by 2 degrees is going to be a difficult task. And this even though originally the goal was to limit it by 1.5 degrees. A 2-degree warming would mean a radical change for our world, with widespread biodiversity collapse, major threat to food and water security, large-scale displacement and far more frequent heat waves. A more precise example would be the ice levels. With a 2-degree warming, the Arctic Ocean would likely be ice-free in summer at least once per decade. In Greenland and the West Antarctic, ice sheets risk tipping points, meaning an irreversible melt. Some might think at first that this is great news, as it would lead to the opening of more trade routes. However, for the environment and for the planet, this is very bad news, as it means the reduction of the Earth's albedo. Albedo is a scientific term that describes how much sunlight a surface can reflect. Bright surfaces, such as ice and snow, have a high albedo, meaning they reflect most of the incoming solar radiation into space and help keep the planet cool. Darker surfaces, like ocean, water or soil, have a low albedo, meaning they absorb more heat. As ice melts, Earth's overall albedo decreases, so more heat is absorbed, which accelerates global warming in a feedback loop. Yet, despite knowing all of this, despite having all the evidences at hand, nothing changes. We are still consuming more day after day, and our fossil fuel consumption, for example, continues to increase. The overshoot day keeps drawing closer, and it looks like we're making the choice of the blue pill instead of the red pill. But let's think for a minute, and let's imagine what taking the red pill looks like. Nowadays, growth and GDP have been the guiding lights for our societies, always aiming for more profit and production while minimizing the costs and thus exploiting inequalities and overconsuming. We went from a system where growth was a tool to a system where growth is the goal. The red pill would thus be going for the opposite, going for degrowth. I know that degrowth at first might sound like some heretical nonsense coming from a chaos or end of world theory, but when we dig deep, it isn't as harsh. In essence, degrowth aims to reduce the size of the economy and achieve a post-growth society. Reducing the size of the economy implies getting rid or reforming some sectors that are deemed unnecessary and consuming at a slower pace. We will still be consuming the same thing, just more slowly. Whereas a post-growth society corresponds to a stationary economy in harmony with nature, where decisions are taken collectively and where riches are equitably shared to prosper without growth. As I said, degrowth aims to reduce the size of the economy by eliminating or reforming some sectors which are unnecessary. A translation of this idea would be getting rid or reforming the advertising industry. It may not look like it at first, but advertising has a clear impact on consumers' behavior in our modern societies. advertising goes well beyond just informing about a product. No, it associates a meaning to goods, meaning that goods are no longer just satisfiers of needs, but communicators of meaning in terms of status, identity, and lifestyle. Let's look at, for example, the following ad for the iPhone 16e.
Batteries come back to me and make your mama proud.
I need your arms around me. I need to feel your touch.
Well, this ad doesn't say much about the phone, doesn't it? No information is available about the components or any other details other than the price might be low. However, if we analyze the ad, it shows a rather minimalist and aesthetic visual that is not just for the sake of making the iPhone look good, no, but rather to enforce the idea that the iPhone 16e belongs to a refined, creative and modern lifestyle. This is further highlighted with the emphasis on the phone's physical elegance. Many scholars have also argued that advertising has been key in managing demand and shaping the modern consumer society. It not only told people that consumption was acceptable, but also made it desirable and even moral to seek happiness and social status through what they buy. For instance, today, someone who has the latest model of a product will always be looked upon with admiration, which is clearly a sign of how advertising has normalized constant upgrading as a marker of identity and success. Going even deeper, some scholars argue that advertising is essential in reproducing the capitalist society because it embeds values such as individualism, competition, and endless consumption into everyday life, which are core values of the capitalist world. A strong example is Nike's famous Just Do It campaign. Behind the slogan lies more than a simple motivational message. No, it promotes the ideology of athletic excellence, suggesting that buying Nike products brings you closer to being like the best. At the same time, it implies that to stay on top, you must continually acquire the latest gear and models. This illustrates how advertising naturalizes capitalist values by transforming consumption into a necessary part of identity and success. What I gave you right now in terms of information is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of academic research. But this isn't the focus of our video. The focus is changing that system, changing that industry. Now, we need to ask ourselves the following question. How should the advertising industry be changed and to what end? Or rather, to what end should the advertising industry be changed and how? In this video, the idea that I want to push forward is to reform the advertising industry so that it channels more future-minded messages and calls people into action to reach a post-growth society. To this end, we need to distinguish between different kinds of advertising. In order to do so, I have established the following point and reward system. Now, before going on to the explanation, here's a little disclaimer. This system is purely theoric and was thought of in an ideal world. Let's take an imaginary state that we will call State A. Tomorrow, the State A decides to make a distinction between ads that have a purely consumerist aim and those that don't. Consumerist ads are easy to define. They are ads that aim purely at consumption. Non-consumerist ads, also known as neutral ads, are advertisements that aim solely to inform the consumer without attempting to influence their purchasing decisions in any way. Finally, we need to create a third category in which will be included advertisements which aims at promoting and informing on more sustainable behaviors or that call people into action. Let's call this one the hope ads. Then the State A, having established the previous classifications, proceeds to establish a reward and sanction system to push companies to change their advertising structure. An ideal reward system could be as follows. In the State A, every company would start with 1,000 points, and then, depending on their advertising strategy or structure, the company will see itself rewarded or penalized points based on the proportion of consumerist, neutral, and hopeful ads. To illustrate all of this, let's take a look at this table. As said before, points are attributed depending on the proportion of a certain type of ad. For example, let's say a company has 51% or more of consumerist ad, then this company will lose 600 points. However, if the same company has 51% or more of hope ads, then this company will win 700 points. Now, let's take any random company that we will call company A. Let's say that 55% of A's ads have a consumerist goal. Then the company loses 600 points. In addition to that, 25% are neutral and only 25% are hope ads. As a result of that, A only has 500 points left. However, now let's take another company that we will call B. B structures its ad system the following way. 25% are consumerist, another 30% are neutral, and 45% are hope ads. As a result, B only loses 100 points. Having established these qualifications is good, however, we need to attribute a reward system in order to make these points meaningful. The reward system is based on different tiers, ranging from A to E. Each tier has its own consequences. The highest tiers are rewarding, whereas the lowest are penalizing. Now, a company with only 400 points will see its taxes on income and eco-contribution increase as it is ranked in tier E. However, B, with 900 points, will only see its eco-contribution tax increase. The rise in income tax will have to be proportional to the size of the business or the company, and the same applies to the eco-contribution tax to ensure fairness. Now, in addition to this, our state A decides to create a ranking system to add some competition, as he knows that companies love competing against one another. But the ranking system does not come all alone. It also comes with a reward system labeled in the following table. At the end of the year, the companies will be ranked in terms of how many points that they have, and afterwards the points will be reset, kinda like it works in video game. The top 1% companies with the most points will start with a bonus of 400 points, totaling 1,400 points. However, this ranking will only be open to companies from the A tier. If we open this ranking to every tier, meaning from A to E, then there would be a risk that companies work together and all try to have the same number of points, so that everyone can benefit from these rewards. However, our goal here is to push them to change their advertising structure. Thus, we need to make the highest tier the most attractive one. Finally, state A, to ensure fair competition and because some industries have more resources than others, wishes to create a public fund aimed at helping smaller businesses in the creation of meaningful and impactful hope ads. However, there will be some prerequisites to access this fund. Smaller businesses will need to demonstrate a willingness to create hope ads and meet a certain quota per year. This fund can be financed partially through a tax imposed on those ranked in E tier. Therefore, the second table will now look like this. Now, let's not forget the goal of all of this, to generate hope, action, and a change of mentality and behavior in people's mind. As mentioned earlier, companies through their ads have been conveying capitalist values and messages. However, they could also do the opposite and convey non-capitalist values. Companies could, for example, showcase greener lifestyles and spark real change by tapping into our emotions, because the ads that truly work in the end are the ones that make us feel something. This, in theory, would lead to actions ranging from daily habits to more important movements. For example, this could mean biking instead of driving, choosing second-hand clothes over fast fashion, or eating local food instead of imported goods. On a larger scale, it could mean joining a community garden, taking part in a cleanup event, or even marching together for climate justice. Cutting down consumerist ads would also mean slowing down consumption, which might reduce production and jobs. However, this can be addressed by shortening working hours instead of cutting workers, since less work naturally means less output. More free time also allows people to pursue non-monetary activities like sports, music, mutual help, or sustainable practices. In this way, it's not endless growth that develops, but rather people themselves in harmony with nature. This system also aligns with the UN's HOPE method, as reforming the advertising system and reorienting it to a more sustainable, regenerative approach enables the creation of an environment where people are kept engaged through emotions. This approach allows for a change in mindset and can translate into actions. The idea behind the system I just presented not only came from my studies in politics, economics and sociology, but also from video games. Games use highly effective competitive systems to keep players engaged, and by combining my gaming insight with my academic background, I developed the system I just presented. Now, of course, this would be in an ideal world. In the real world, differentiating the three categories of ads can be tricky, while it can also create some logistical complexity, as tracking everybody company's advertising would be complicated. They would also require a serious check system to avoid any greenwashing from the businesses. Finally, changing the advertising industry cannot solve everything, and a lot more needs to be done. However, one thing is certain: we need to slow down our consumption and our economy. If we continue acting in the same way that we do now, the change will be imposed on us, and not in the way that we want. We still have the time to act now and decide how our future is going to look like. However, it means making sacrifices. And the longer we wait to act, the more sacrifices we will have to make.